"Sir, do you know someone who can help me?" That's how I met the little girl who ended up changing something inside me that day. She couldn't have been older than 5, standing alone in the middle of a busy plaza while people walked past her like she wasn't even there. But the part that still bothers me is this: she never cried. Not once. She asked for help the same way an exhausted adult would ask after giving up too many times already. I remember looking up from my phone, expecting to see her mother nearby, maybe distracted for a second, but there was nobody. Just this tiny little girl in a faded flower dress, holding an old, torn bag against her chest, with both hands like it was the only thing she had left in the world. Her sandals were too big for her feet, her brown hair was tangled badly, and she looked tired in a way kids aren't supposed to look tired. Not sleepy. Tired. That's what hit me. Most kids her age would have been crying or panicking, but she just stood there quietly waiting for me to answer her question, like she already knew people usually said no. I slowly put my phone away and asked her name. Ellie. Then she straightened a little and said, "Ellie Grace." I don't know why that got to me so much. Maybe because little kids only say their full name like that when somebody at home says it with love. I asked if she was hungry, and for a second she didn't answer. She looked down at the ground and rubbed her thumb against the strap of that little bag before finally nodding very slowly. It looked like it hurt her pride to admit it. So I pointed across the plaza toward a snack cart and told her to come eat with me. She didn't hesitate, didn't ask if I was dangerous, didn't even look nervous. She just reached for my hand immediately, like being alone was scarier than trusting a stranger. And honestly, that stayed with me. A few minutes later, we were sitting on a bench with warm cheese, bread, and juice, and I noticed she still wouldn't let go of that little bag, even while eating. She kept it pressed against her side the whole time. I smiled a little and asked her what was inside. Ellie stopped chewing and carefully opened the bag with both hands. Inside was a tiny blue Bible with worn corners, an old faded photograph, a folded handkerchief, and a piece of paper folded so many times it looked soft. Then she looked at me and said quietly, "My mama told me if I keep my Bible close, God stays with me too." I swear something inside me dropped when she said that, because sitting there looking at that little girl, I suddenly felt embarrassed by my own life. My expensive watch, my car parked nearby, all the stupid things I complained about every day. That little girl probably carried everything she owned inside one torn bag, and somehow she still believed God hadn't left her alone. Then out of nowhere, she asked me, "Do you believe in God?" I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. So instead, I asked where her mother was. Ellie pointed upward vaguely, not really toward the sky, more like she didn't know where else to point. She fell. Then she looked down at her juice. She hit her head. A small pause. Then I stayed by myself. She said it so calmly that it took my brain a second to catch up to what she actually meant. No fear, no tears, just acceptance. Like life had already forced her to grow up too fast. And I'm telling you right now, hearing those words from a little girl that small did something to me. I was still sitting there trying to process it when suddenly I heard a woman screaming from across the plaza. "Ellie." I turned and saw a woman running toward us, completely out of breath, her eyes swollen red from crying, hair messy like she'd been searching everywhere for hours. The second she reached Ellie, she dropped to her knees and wrapped both arms around her so tightly it looked like she was afraid the little girl might disappear again if she let go. "Oh my God, I found you." And for the first time since I met her, Ellie smiled. "Sir, please take care of her." Rachel said that to me like she didn't really have another choice. She was still breathing hard from running around the city looking for Ellie, and I could see how exhausted she was. Her hands were shaking a little when she explained what happened. Maya had fallen at work and hit her head badly. She was still in the hospital, unconscious, and the woman who owned the boarding house had thrown Ellie out after the ambulance took her mother away. Rachel told me she'd been searching for that little girl for 2 days. 2 days. I remember looking down at Ellie sitting beside me on that bench, with crumbs still on her dress, holding that little Bible against her chest, like it was keeping her together somehow, and all I could think was, this child spent 2 nights alone outside, and nobody stopped long enough to notice. I told Rachel I'd take Ellie to the hospital myself. She hesitated at first, which honestly I understood. To her, I was just some stranger in expensive clothes, talking to a lost little girl. But before she could decide, Ellie looked up at her and quietly said, "He's the one God sent." Rachel stared at her for a second, then at me, then finally nodded. Please don't let anything happen to her. I told her I wouldn't. Rachel walked away slowly, still turning around every few steps to check on Ellie, and I reached for my phone to call my driver because that's what I did with problems back then. I handled things fast. Money, calls, assistance, cars, everything moved quickly around me. But before I dialed, something made me stop and ask Ellie one more question. What's your mom's full name? She answered immediately. Maya Bennett. And I swear to God, my whole body went cold. The traffic noise faded. The voices around us disappeared. I just sat there staring at that little girl while my phone nearly slipped from my hand. Maya Bennett. I hadn't heard that name in 5 years. I asked Ellie if her mother had a small mark near her chin, and she touched the exact same spot on her own face before nodding. That was the moment everything inside me started coming apart. 5 years earlier, I wasn't rich. I wasn't successful. I was renting a tiny room in a building that smelled like old pipes and cheap cigarettes, trying to survive 1 week at a time. Maya lived right across the hallway from me. We started talking because one night the power went out, and both of us ended up sitting on the floor outside our rooms, waiting for it to come back. That's how it started. Then somehow she became the person I looked for first every day. We ate cheap takeout together, laughed about stupid things, shared bills when one of us was short on money. Back then, she knew the version of me nobody else remembers now. Then my life changed. A business opportunity came along, and I convinced myself leaving was the right thing to do. I promised Maya I'd come back for her once I got stable. I told her it would only be for a little while. But success happened fast. Too fast. And somewhere along the way, I stopped calling as much. Then less, then almost never. And now her little girl was sitting beside me after sleeping on the street for 2 days while I drove around in a car worth more than that entire apartment building we used to live in. Right then my phone rang. It was Emily Harris, my business partner, and the second I heard her voice, I knew something was wrong. Daniel, Vanessa's trying to move everything into her control. I closed my eyes for a second. Earlier that morning, I'd already seen enough messages, documents, and signed papers to understand what was happening. Vanessa had been planning behind my back for months. Emily told me Vanessa was now trying to prove I wasn't stable enough to manage my own company anymore. Honestly, hearing that should have made me angry. But sitting beside Ellie, it suddenly felt small compared to everything else. Then I heard this tiny voice next to me. Sir, are you sad? I looked at her and let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Yeah, sweetheart, a little. Ellie thought quietly for a second before asking, do you want me to pray for you? That almost broke me. Because this little girl had nothing. No safe home. No mother beside her. No idea what was going to happen next. And somehow she still wanted to help me. I nodded. Ellie closed her eyes tightly and folded her tiny hands together. Dear God, please take care of my mama and this man. And thank you for the bread and juice. Amen. That was it. No fancy words, no long prayer. Just a tired little girl asking God to protect the people she cared about. And sitting there beside her, I realized something that made me feel ashamed of myself all over again. That child had lost almost everything, and she still had more faith than I did. I stood up before my emotions showed too much and held my hand out to her. Come on, Ellie, let's go see your mom. She slipped her tiny hand into mine immediately and smiled a little before saying, I told you God sent you. I didn't answer her because honestly, I didn't know what to believe anymore. The ride to the hospital was quiet. Ellie sat in the back seat looking out the window like every light outside fascinated her. She didn't touch anything in the car, didn't ask questions, didn't act excited the way most kids would in a car like that. She just sat there holding her little bag tightly against her chest the entire drive. And the more I watched her in the mirror, the worse I felt. Because kids that quiet usually learn the hard way that asking for too much makes adults disappear. When the hospital finally came into view, those cold white lights hit the windshield, and for some reason my chest tightened so badly I had trouble breathing. Because deep down, I knew the second I walked through those doors, my life was about to change in a way I couldn't undo anymore. Before my driver even opened the door, Ellie was already staring at the hospital like she was trying to be brave before she had to go inside. Is this where my mama is? She asked. I told her yes, and she nodded once. then climbed out of the car carefully, quietly, the way some kids move when they've learned not to take up too much space. That small movement bothered me more than I expected. We walked through the sliding doors, and the smell of sanitizer hit me first, then the low voices, the quick footsteps, the sound of people trying to stay calm in a place where almost nobody really was. At the front desk, I gave Maya Bennett's name, and the receptionist typed for a few seconds before telling us she was on the second floor, room B. Ellie tightened her hand around mine, but she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. I felt every bit of fear in that tiny grip. A doctor met us near the hallway before I even had to ask. "Are you family?" she said. I paused just long enough to feel the weight of that question. "I'm someone close to her," I answered. The doctor didn't push. She told me Maya had suffered a serious head injury. She was stable, but she still hadn't woken up. Ellie's fingers squeezed mine harder. "She will wake up, right?" The doctor looked down at her and softened her voice. "We're doing everything we can, sweetheart." But I could tell there was more she wasn't saying, so I asked about the treatment. The doctor took a breath and admitted there was no insurance, and the bills were already building fast. I didn't ask another question. I took out my card and placed it in her hand. "Do whatever she needs. Don't wait on paperwork." The doctor looked at the card, then at me, then at Ellie, and nodded. "We'll take care of her." Ellie tugged gently on my hand. "Can I see my mom?" We went inside, and the room was so quiet it almost hurt. Soft lights, steady machine sounds, white sheets, and Maya lying there pale and still with a bandage around her head. For a second, I forgot how to move. 5 years of avoiding her name, and there she was, smaller than I remembered, but still Maya. Ellie let go of my hand and walked to the bed slowly, like she was scared one wrong step might break the moment. She stood on her toes and reached for her mother's hand. "Mama," she whispered. Then she took a breath, trying so hard not to cry. "I'm here. God sent someone." I had to step out of the room. I leaned against the hallway wall and looked down because my eyes were burning, and I wasn't ready for anyone to see that. My phone buzzed again. It was my attorney this time. "Daniel, we found it," he said. "The witness Vanessa used isn't real. We have proof. The paperwork, the notary visit, all of it can be challenged." I closed my eyes. "So what happens now?" he said. "Now you decide how far you want to take this." I looked through the small window into Maya's room. Ellie was still holding her mother's hand with both of hers. Tiny but steady, like she had decided she was not leaving again. "I'll decide later," I said, and hung up. For the first time in years, business could wait. Then I heard heels clicking down the hallway. Slow, sharp, too confident. I didn't even have to turn around to know who it was. Vanessa Cole appeared at the corner with a lawyer beside her and a folder in her hand, dressed like she had walked into a boardroom instead of a hospital. Her eyes landed on me first, then on Ellie, who had fallen asleep against my side after the doctor asked us to wait outside. Vanessa's face changed when she saw the little girl in my arms. Not concern, not confusion, irritation. "What is this?" she asked under her breath. I didn't look away from Ellie. "Lower your voice." Vanessa stepped closer. "Daniel, this is serious. You need to sign these documents today." I finally lifted my eyes. "I know what you did." She froze for half a second, just long enough to tell me everything. "I don't know what you're talking about." I kept my voice low because Ellie was sleeping. "I know about the fake witness. I know about the lawyer. I know about the plan." The hallway went still. Her lawyer shifted beside her. Vanessa tightened her fingers around the folder. "You don't have proof." That was when I saw the mask start to crack. Not all at once. Just enough. "Leave now," I said, "and I won't take this further with the authorities tonight. Stay here and push me, and I make the call right now." Her lawyer touched her arm and whispered something, but Vanessa pulled away, staring at Ellie like the child had ruined everything. "All of this because of her?" she said, and the way she said "her" made my jaw tighten. Before I could answer, Ellie stirred in my arms. Her eyes opened halfway, sleepy but aware, and she looked straight at Vanessa. "I'm not her," Ellie said softly. The hallway went quiet. Even a nurse passing by slowed down. Ellie sat up a little, still leaning against me, and said, "I'm Ellie." Those 2 words were small, but they landed harder than anything I could have said, because in that moment, Vanessa saw what I had already understood. Ellie wasn't a problem to be moved out of the way. She was a person. A little girl who had already been pushed aside too many times. And for the first time that day, I held her a little closer and knew I wasn't going to let anyone do it again. Vanessa's lawyer looked down first, and that told me enough. Vanessa stood there frozen, still holding that folder like it could protect her, but the confidence she walked in with was gone. Before she could say another word, the door to Maya's room opened and the doctor stepped out quickly. "She's awake." Ellie was off my lap before I could even move. She ran straight past me into the room, crying out, "Mama." I stayed in the hallway for 1 second longer, then looked at Vanessa and said, "It's over." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. She knew exactly what I meant. For once, she had no answer. She turned and walked away with her lawyer, not proud anymore, not certain anymore, just exposed. When I stepped into that hospital room, Ellie was already wrapped around Maya like she was afraid to let go. Maya looked weak, pale, still trying to understand where she was, but her arms were around our daughter. Then her eyes moved past Ellie and found me. Everything in her face changed. It wasn't shock exactly. It was like seeing a memory walk back into the room after 5 years. Her voice came out low and broken. "Daniel?" I took 1 step closer, then another. "It's me." Her eyes filled, and I could see years sitting between us. Not just sadness, not just anger, time. Promises. The kind of silence people carry when they've been left with too many questions. "I thought I'd never see you again," she said. Ellie looked from her mother to me, not fully understanding, but feeling enough to stay quiet. Then she touched Maya's hand and said, "Mama, he's nice." Maya tried to smile. "I know, sweetheart." But I could tell there was something else behind her eyes, something she had held for too long. She took a slow breath and looked at me. "Daniel, there's something you need to know." I already felt it coming. Maybe I had felt it from the moment Ellie told me her mother's name. But I didn't stop her. Maya swallowed hard. "After you left, I found out I was pregnant. I tried to find you. I really did. But I couldn't reach you." Her eyes moved to Ellie, then back to me. "She's your daughter." The room went quiet in a way I'll never forget. Not empty quiet, heavy quiet. The kind where your whole life rearranges itself before you can say a word. I looked at Ellie, really looked at her this time. The shape of her face, the way she watched people, the way she tried to act brave even when she was scared. And suddenly I saw it. I saw myself in that little girl. Not in some dramatic way. Just there, plain and real. In front of me. Ellie tilted her head and asked, "Sir? Are you my dad?" That question hit harder than anything Vanessa had done, harder than any business loss, harder than any betrayal. I lowered myself to her level because I didn't want to answer her from above. "Yes," I said, and my voice almost failed me. And I was wrong. I should have been there. I took a breath and looked at both of them. "But I want to stay now." Ellie studied me with that serious little face of hers, like she was deciding whether I deserved the answer. Then she crossed her small arms and said, "Okay. But you have to learn how to pray." For the first time in a long time, I laughed for real. Not because it was funny, but because something in that room finally let me breathe. Maya laughed too, weakly, but it was there. Ellie reached out and took my hand, with one hand and Maya's with the other. Then she closed her eyes, and somehow both of us followed her like she was the strongest person in that room. "Dear God, thank you." That was all she said. Simple, small, enough. And sitting there in that plain hospital room, with no money showing, no title, no boardroom, no one trying to impress anyone, I finally understood what I had been missing all those years. It wasn't another company. It wasn't another house. It wasn't another win. It was this. Maya still weak but alive. Ellie holding both our hands like she was tying us back together. And me, standing in front of the family I never knew I had, realizing life had just handed me something money could never buy back, a second chance. It wasn't just that Maya had woken up. It was the way that little hospital room suddenly felt like my whole life had been waiting there for me to catch up. Maya looked at me from the bed, still weak, still pale, but awake. And there was no anger in her face the way I expected. That almost made it worse. "I thought you were never coming back," she said quietly. I took a breath, but for once I didn't reach for an excuse. There wasn't one good enough. Not for 5 years. Not for leaving her alone. Not for missing the first years of Ellie's life. I was wrong, I told her. With you, and with her. Maya closed her eyes for a second, and one tear slipped down the side of her face. Life wasn't easy, Daniel, she said. But Ellie never complained. She just kept believing. I looked over at Ellie. She was sitting in the chair beside the bed, her little legs swinging above the floor, that same worn bag tucked against her side like it had been with her through everything. To anyone else, she might have looked like a tired child in a hospital room. But to me, sitting there, she looked like every year I had missed. Every birthday I never knew about. Every night Maya had probably held her and wondered why I never came back. I swallowed hard and said, I'm going to take care of both of you now. Maya opened her eyes. Not because you feel guilty. I shook my head. No, because I want to. Because I should have wanted to a long time ago. For a moment, nobody spoke. But that quiet didn't feel cold anymore. It felt like something broken had stopped bleeding. The next few days, I didn't go back to the office. I canceled meetings. I ignored calls. People kept trying to pull me back into the life I had built, but for the first time in years, that life could wait. I stayed at the hospital with Maya and Ellie, learning things I should have learned much earlier. How to sit beside someone without checking the time. How to listen without trying to fix everything with money. How to be there and not make it about myself. Ellie started walking around the hospital like she belonged there, saying hello to nurses, smiling at patients, carrying her little bag on her arm everywhere she went. She still didn't ask for much. That part still hurt me. A child should know she's allowed to want things. One afternoon, I found her sitting in the hallway, looking down into her bag. I sat beside her and asked, "Can I see it again?" She studied my face for a second, then nodded and opened the bag carefully. The little blue Bible, the folded handkerchief, the old photograph, and that small piece of paper were all still there. I pointed to the paper. "What does that say?" She handed it to me. The handwriting was big and crooked, clearly written by a child, but I could read every word. "God, please take care of my mama. And if you can, please send someone to help us. Amen." I sat there holding that paper, and for a second I couldn't speak. "You wrote this?" Ellie nodded. "I asked every day. I forced myself to breathe. And do you think it worked?" She shrugged like the answer was obvious. "You came." I looked away because I didn't trust my face in that moment. A few days later, Maya was cleared to leave. She was still weak, but she was standing, and I stayed close to her side with my hand under her arm, careful with every step. Ellie walked ahead of us like she knew exactly where we were supposed to go. Outside, the car was waiting, but before we got in, I stopped. Across the street was the same plaza, the same bench, the same place where Ellie had first walked up to me and asked if I knew someone who could help her. I looked at Maya, then at Ellie. "Can we go over there for a minute?" Ellie smiled right away. "Yes." We crossed the street together and stopped in front of the bench. It looked ordinary now, just a bench in a busy plaza, people passing, cars moving, nothing special to anyone else. But to me, that place didn't feel ordinary anymore. That was where my life had split open. That was where a little girl with a torn bag had asked for help and somehow brought me back to the family I never knew I had. I looked down at Ellie and said softly, "This is where I found you, huh?" She tilted her head and corrected me the way only Ellie could. "No, Daddy, this is where God sent you." I didn't argue. I just held her hand a little tighter, because maybe for the first time in my life, I was starting to believe she might be right. I think a lot of people spend years chasing the wrong proof that their life matters. Money, success, attention, status, I did too. And none of it warned me how empty a house can feel when there's nobody inside waiting for you. None of it prepares you for the moment a little child looks at you with trust you didn't earn yet and still decides to hold your hand anyway. What stayed with me the most was never the business betrayal, the lawyers, or almost losing everything I built. It was a little girl sitting on a bench, trying to sound brave while asking strangers for help because she had nobody else left. Some people are saved by miracles. Some are saved by being loved at the exact moment they no longer believe they deserve it. If there's one thing this experience changed in me, it's this. Sometimes we wait too long to call people back, to fix things, to show up, to say, I'm sorry, or I should have been there. And life can get very quiet while we're busy thinking there will always be more time. So if someone in your life still matters to you, don't wait for the perfect moment. Most of the important moments in life never look important when they first arrive. And maybe kindness matters more than people realize. Because one small decision to stop, listen, and care can completely change someone else's future, and sometimes your own too. If this story touched you even a little, let me know in the comments what part stayed in your heart the longest. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family, second chances, and real human connection, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for more stories like this. Disclaimer: this story is inspired by real emotions and situations from everyday life. Some characters, names, and scenes were adapted for storytelling purposes, and visual representations in the video may include AI-generated characters and imagery. I think a lot of people spend years chasing the wrong proof that their life matters. Money, success, attention, status. I did too. And none of it warned me how empty a house can feel when there's nobody inside waiting for you. None of it prepares you for the moment a little child looks at you with trust you didn't earn yet and still decides to hold your hand anyway. What stayed with me the most was never the business betrayal, the lawyers, or almost losing everything I'd built. It was a little girl sitting on a bench trying to sound brave while asking strangers for help because she had nobody else left. Some people are saved by miracles. Some are saved by being loved at the exact moment they no longer believe they deserve it. If there's one thing this experience changed in me, it's this. Sometimes we wait too long to call people back, to fix things, to show up, to say, I'm sorry, or I should have been there. And life can get very quiet while we're busy, thinking there will always be more time. So, if someone in your life still matters to you, don't wait for the perfect moment. Most of the important moments in life never look important when they first arrive. And maybe kindness matters more than people realize. Because one small decision to stop, listen, and care can completely change someone else's future, and sometimes your own too. If this story touched you even a little, let me know in the comments what part stayed in your heart the longest. And if you enjoy emotional stories about family, second chances, and real human connection, don't forget to subscribe and stay with us for more stories like this. Disclaimer: this story is inspired by real emotions and situations from everyday life. Some characters, names, and scenes were adapted for storytelling purposes, and visual representations in the video may include AI-generated characters and imagery.